welcome to episode 9 of Le Chemin du Roi. Glad to have you back. Today we're going to be looking at some more towns along that famous road. My name is Lisa Elvin-Stelzhari, and I am a genealogist and a passionate traveler. The purpose of this series has been really to examine the roads that our ancestors took. And whenever I do genealogy, which is daily, I always say the same thing. It's all about location, 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 just like in real estate. So we want to make sure we understand that we know the history, we know the layout, we know how to get somewhere. And traveling without that information is truly like traveling without a road map, or, in today's vernacular, without GPS. So with that in mind, what we're going to be doing is looking at all the roads, this particular road that was extremely famous and was one in which you're going to get a lot of history. This is an actual road trip I want to take. So right now I'm doing a virtual road trip itinerary. A lot of the things that I'm putting on here I want to do. Well, actually everything I put on there I want to do. But there might be things that you as a viewer go, oh, no, she's missing out on this, or check this out, or I heard about this. Please post it in the notes below, or send me an email at Lisa at Have Roots Will Travel. Would love to hear from that. Speaking of which, I have a website called Have Roots Will Travel. I am also on Facebook and on Twitter, and I would love, like I said, for you all to give me any feedback that you might think would be helpful. And with that in mind, let us start back on our journey. And we are now going to Berthierville. Now, the idea for Le Chemin du Roi came to me when I've been doing my concurrent series, Les Filles du Roi, which is about the ladies who came from New France and helped populate New France. When I started doing the genealogy of them, I started realizing all these small roads, and then I said, I need to go there. And then that's what led me to realize where they all are, and I kind of put it all together and said, I've got to go on this very famous road called Le Chemin du Roi, or the King's Road, or the King's Highway. And it is a phenomenal journey. But let us find out a little bit more about the road itself. The King's Highway is part of the road called, or the route, the Quebec highway route called 138. Route 138 starts off in a small town in northern Quebec called Blanc-Sablon. You can see it on the left hand of your screen, the big arrow over here. And then it goes all the way down to the arrow pointing to the bottom, and it points to a town called Elgin, Quebec, which sits on the New York-Quebec border. And the actual Route 138, it's a whopping 880 miles. It's about 114-20 kilometers. We are not taking this road, but this road, if you did, encompasses 5 regions of Quebec. There are 17 regions. So it gives you a big old chunk of Quebec. It starts off at the Côte Nord, and then it goes into the Capitale Nationale region, Mauricie region, Lanaudière, and finally finishing off at Montérégie. So with that being said, we are not doing that. The part of Quebec that we are doing is called Le Chemin du Roi. And this is actually one of the oldest highways in Canada. And how did it start? Well, in 1706, Le Conseil Supérieur, the Grand Council of New France, decreed that a road should be built to connect the houses along the north shore of the St. Lawrence to Montreal. So in true government fashion, work began 25 years later. In 1731, under the supervision of the Grand Voyer, which is a senior road surveyor, Eustache Lannelier de Boisclair. And it was completed, I think, in record time in 1737. Upon completion, the Chemin du Roi was 7.4 meters or 24 feet wide, and with over 280 kilometers, which is about 170 miles. And it crossed, get this, 37 seigneuries. And the Chemin du Roi was the longest road in existence at the time north of Mexico. In 1910, the portion of the Chemin du Roi on Montreal Island was renamed by the district and county of Montreal, and it was renamed Gouin Boulevard, and it no longer had anything to do with the Chemin du Roi. When I do my actual trip, trust me, I'm going on Gouin Boulevard. But there won't be any signs or anything. I'll just have to know. Just kind of like Route 66 here in the United States, where you see certain, you know that it was there at one point. And so the Chemin du Roi was the first roadway that could accommodate wheeled vehicles along its entire length, which of course we're not meaning cars, we're meaning carriages. And it, I think, really, truly did more to develop Quebec and create that sense of solidarity and, I guess, connection than any other thing at that time could have done, because it meant that people could travel from one place to the other. So if you left a place, if you went from Portneuf to Sainte Anne de la Parade, for example, you could go and visit your parents and your grandparents. You could actually do it in an easier fashion than you had before. And I think to some extent roads are very important to humanity. They always have been. And we have the Quebec, the Trans-Canada Highway. We have the highway system in the United States that came along in the 50s, Route 66. All of these kind of roads serve to connect us in many, many ways. And I think the King's Road is no exception. So I've entitled this, Are We There Yet? Because let's get real, this Chemin du Roi is actually, according to Google, 2 hours and 20 minutes long. So if you traveled it by car, going at a reasonable speed, it would take you about 2 hours to do. We are taking 11 YouTube videos and quite a number of hours. And I fully intend, I'm not doing it in 2 hours. It's going to take a few days. And when I take that actual trip, I will be seeing those highway signs called Chemin du Roi or Vieux Chemin, and I will be taking my picture with those signs at any time I can. And that's what people do. It is a very, very famous kind of road that people love to kind of put a marker in as they go along. So where are we going? Well, we're going to start off in a town called Berthierville. Now, Berthierville is a small town of about 4,000 people. Berthierville is interesting because it is completely surrounded by the parish of Saint-Geneviève de Berthier. So it's kind of together. Berthierville and Saint-Geneviève de Berthier are not one and the same, obviously, but the church and everything else, it is surrounded by it. So in order to get out of Berthierville, you have to go through this other town. So let's review a little bit of the birth of Berthierville. So in 1672, Sir Randé, he obtains the seigneury from who else but the intendant Jean Talon. By 1673, Sir means Sir Alexander Berthier purchases the seigneury. Now, and then by 1718, Pierre de Lesage purchases the seigneury. So it goes through a lot. This is a very different kind of seigneury. Now, this is the intro. All of it is interesting to me. But what I find interesting is 1765, James Cuthbert purchases this seigneury, and then it then stays in the family until the end of the seigneurial system, which was in 1854, I believe. So we've got James, and then James Jr., and then Edward Cuthbert. Okay, so these is English. These are English Protestant, British actually, and Canadian, English Canadian eventually, people who would become the seigneurs of Berthierville. Very interesting. Now, one of the two big things to see in Berthierville are, of course, the Cutthroat Chapel. Now, you may hear it pronounced Quebec. I think in a previous video I talked about that. But this is the Cutthroat Chapel, and it was designed by the first actually, James Cuthbert, in 1786 after his wife died. It was the first Presbyterian church to be built in Quebec, and originally it was served as a burial chapel. But Presbyterians in the regions would come to worship here as well. And then it was abandoned for many years until the Quebec government in 1977 took it over and said we want to preserve it. Now, and I've included the link for you to go and visit that as well. Now, Gilles Villeneuve Museum. For those of you who don't know, Gilles Villeneuve was a famous race car driver who died tragically so young. He was born in Berthierville and is here with a museum that is dedicated to his amazing career is found. Although I know nothing about racing, I remember when he died and how the entire nation mourned. It was a national tragedy. So this is anybody, I'm sure, even though I'm not a race car enthusiast, I want to go there. I think it would be interesting to see his contribution to a sport and to, the Canadian pride in me kind of says, okay, I want to see this. Well, this is a taste of Berthierville. Well, we've got Délices d'Antan, okay? They make donuts, among other things, I'm sure. And it's made from a traditional recipe called potato donuts. And they're made with unbleached flour and real potatoes and all that good stuff. And these potatoes are actually grown in the fields surrounding in Lanaudière. So really, really authentic. Absolutely something that I want to taste. And they retail these donuts throughout Quebec at grocery stores and specialty boutiques. So you've got all kinds of stuff yummy things like breads and pies and all sorts of goodies. Definitely worth a look. Now, the cheese factory is another thing. I gotta go. I told you about cheese in Quebec. It's a thing. Fromagerie Domaine Fiodel. Very, very interesting. For over 20 years, they've been focusing on authentic cheese making, and they make 11 kinds of cheese. I went through the website. It was just amazing. Amazing. They're open Monday to Friday, and I posted the link for that as well. Benny and Company. It's a regional chain focused on chicken and poutine. It is a rival to my beloved St. Hubert barbecue, but I will be partaking. I don't know if I'm going to be partaking in this particular branch at Berthierville. They've got over 50 restaurants, so I suspect I'll be checking this out. For sure on my journey. And this chain actually began in the region of Lanaudière in 1960, so it kind of is local. So now we come to Saint-Geneviève de Berthier, which, as we've talked about in the previous slide, it surrounds Berthierville. And there's about 2,300 people that live here. It's famous for a covered bridge. That's wonderful. Some farming. Obviously, the church that we'll be talking about in a bit. The rectory is there as well. And obviously, the history of this town is tied very closely to Berthierville. In 1710, the widow of Alexandre Berthier gave the land to the church so that it could build a church and a proper church. And so it became a parish. By 1727, the parish was established. Now, the parish of Saint-Geneviève was named after the youngest daughter of Alexandre Berthier. And so you can see how absolutely beautiful it is. The parish itself, the parish of Saint-Geneviève, was established in 1855. Apparently it is growing very rapidly as, kind of a city people escaping into the country. And apparently there's a large tree nursery here that has been here since 1908. Very amazing. Obviously that church is just amazing. It dates from 1787, and it was founded, it was actually financed, this second church was financed by none other than James Cuthbert, who decided, even though he's a Protestant faith, he knew how important it was to the people that he was the tenants, if you will, that were on his land, how important that church was to them. And so he definitely provided money and support for this endeavor. The inside of this chapel looks amazing. It just kind of takes your breath away. And so the century dates from 1919 and replace the cemetery dates from 1919 and replaces obviously the first one. Remember, it would have simply transferred. So if you have people in Saint Genevieve or Berthierville, depending on where exactly they lived at that time, this would be a starting point for you as well. And so ends another episode of Le Chemin du Roi. I can't wait to see you on episode 10. I look forward. We're almost at the end of our journey. Until then, au revoir.